From flying monkeys and wicked witches to unlikely friends and a world that lies somewhere over the rainbow, The Wizard of Oz is arguably one of the most beloved stories of all time. The idea is said to have originated as whimsical bedtime stories that author L. Frank Baum created for his children. The original novel, The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, was first published in 1900 and was an instant success. By the time the book entered the public domain in 1956, over 3 million copies had been sold. L. Frank Baum went on to write 13 additional Oz books, and a total of 40 canonical Oz stories exist today. In April of 2000, the USA's Library of Congress declared The Wizard of Oz as America's greatest and best-loved homegrown fairy tale. Of course, a story as great and powerful as Oz can't be restricted to a single medium. The most notable adaptations of the story include the 1902 Broadway musical, and of course, the beloved 1939 Technicolor film from MGM starring Judy Garland. But it doesn't stop there. The Wizard of Oz transcends the worlds of film, theater, television, books, comics, and games with countless adaptations and references. One of the most elusive mediums for this timeless story, however, are theme parks. Many of the world's greatest stories, especially those that involve fantastical settings and thrilling adventures, are brought to life through the magic of theme park attractions. And with a story as whimsical and adventurous as The Wizard of Oz, I'm sure we can all agree that it's the perfect candidate for some kind of theme park representation. Despite this, Aussian theme park offerings have been bafflingly slim, but not absent. Good day everyone, and welcome back to Adventures with Parker. With a local theme park that was abandoned but later resurrected by a dedicated community, a never-built, world-class destination that was cancelled due to shady businessmen and an environmental disaster, and a new precinct coming to a theme park down under, the conversation surrounding the Wizard of Oz franchise in the theme park industry has just as many twists and turns as a Kansas tornado. Nevertheless, it's time to journey over the rainbow, because in today's episode of Theme Park Parlay, we're going to discuss the complicated and elusive theme park history of the Wizard of Oz. So without any further ado, let's follow the yellow brick road and talk theme parks. It should come as no surprise that the first idea for an attraction based on The Wizard of Oz came from one of the early legends of the theme park industry, none other than one Mr. Walter Elias Disney. Now, Walt had always been fascinated by The Wizard of Oz, and he had plans to make it his second animated feature after Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. However, the studio didn't own the film rights at the time, and because they were already so preoccupied with the production of Snow White, Walt missed the opportunity and the film rights were snatched up by MGM, who went on to create the iconic film that we all know and love today. Disney did eventually acquire the rights for the other 13 Oz novels in 1954, but nothing made it past production. Despite not having a Disney-owned film for it, Walt still wanted to bring a small Wizard of Oz attraction to Disneyland. Not much is known about this never-built ride, but it would have been another classic Fantasyland dark ride where guests would find themselves in a party in Oz with several iconic Ozian characters in attendance. The reason for the ride's cancellation is unknown, but we do know that Walt was very passionate about this project because of his connection to the characters. If it were built, it certainly would have made a lasting impact on the Disney parks as we know them today. Beech Mountain, North Carolina may seem like an unlikely place for the world's first Wizard of Oz theme park, but that's exactly where our story takes us next. The Land of Oz was dreamt up by designer Jack Pence and built by brothers Grover, Harry, and Spencer Robbins. Their goal was to turn the popular Beech Mountain ski resort into a year-round destination, and thus, the Land of Oz was born. Construction began in 1965, and on June 15, 1970, the park opened its gates for the very first time. In attendance at the opening day celebrations was Hollywood actress Debbie Reynolds, who cut the ribbon along with her 13-year-old daughter, Carrie Fisher. Guests visiting the Land of Oz would assume the role of Dorothy and relive her journey down the yellow brick road, which consisted of over 44,000 glazed yellow bricks. Starting off in Kansas, guests experienced a tornado that would transport them to Oz. From there, the trek down the yellow brick road allowed guests to visit several iconic costumed characters, including the Scarecrow, the Tin Woodman, the Cowardly Lion, and the Wicked Witch of the West, along with other Ozian residents. Upon reaching the Emerald City, guests could explore numerous gift shops and an amphitheater that staged a Magic Moment show every 30 minutes. The Emerald City was also home to a museum that showcased props and costumes from the 1939 film. Finally, the experience ended with a hot air balloon-themed chairlift ride that would transport guests back to the front entrance, giving them one final bird's-eye view of the park and the surrounding mountain vistas. Although Land of Oz was very successful in its first few years, tragedy struck in 1975 when a fire broke out in the Emerald City. Rumor has it that the fire was set by a disgruntled employee of the park. The inferno destroyed several buildings and many of the artifacts that were housed in the museum, including an original dress that was worn by Judy Garland. The area was rebuilt the following year, and the park reopened under new management, but the Land of Oz's struggles were far from over. Now plagued with financial headaches from the attempted restoration, the Land of Oz struggled for 4 years before closing its gates in 1980, just one short decade after opening. Abandoned, the park succumbed to decay and vandalism, and many components of the park were demolished in the mid-80s. During this time, the old balloon ride was removed and relocated to Beech Mountain Ski Resort, where it continues to operate as the lift for the honorably named Oz Run. But this is not where the story of the Land of Oz ends. In 1988, a union of former employees who referred to themselves as Aussies began to pledge the city to allow them to reopen the park for a small temporary event. On Independence Day 1991, costume characters returned to the Land of Oz to welcome guests for just one short day in the Emerald City. This event continued every year, and by the late 90s, renovations were made to restore and maintain the park's iconic structures. Today, the Land of Oz operates as a semi-active theme park with their annual Autumn in Oz event and a summer event called Journey with Dorothy. But if you find yourself in the Beech Mountain area at any other time of year, you can still request private tours, parties, and even weddings. And so, this cherished park continues to live on because of the dedicated community who continues to believe in a land somewhere over the mountains of North Carolina. They say that ideas in the theme park industry never truly die. They're just shoved away for a later time. Well, when it comes to Walt's cancelled Wizard of Oz attraction, that couldn't be more true. Well, sort of. The idea behind the Great Movie Ride began as the headlining attraction for a proposed Epcot pavilion based on show business and film production. Originally to be called Great Moments in the Movies, the concept seemed to be a hit with newly appointed CEO Michael Eisner. In fact, he thought that the idea was so strong that it could be the basis for an entirely new theme park, Disney MGM Studios, or Hollywood Studios as we know it today. The Great Movie Ride opened alongside the park on May 1st, 1989. The ride would take guests on an interactive journey through the movies, placing them into the center of several iconic films from the 20th century. Imagineers wanted the ride, and the park itself, to represent the broad spectrum of cinema, including titles outside of the Disney catalog. This was mainly accomplished through a licensing deal with MGM. Now, remind me again which iconic and beloved 1939 film was owned by MGM. Oh yeah, the mother Wizard of Oz. This scene had to be my favorite part of the entire ride, and it took up the place of honor as the final scene before the grand finale. Here, the ride vehicles entered Munchkin Land, where guests could see Dorothy's house on top of the Wicked Witch of the East, just as the Munchkins began to appear and sing in celebration. Suddenly, a puff of smoke rose from the ground as an A100 animatronic of the Wicked Witch of the West portrayed by Margaret Hamilton, appeared and began to interrogate the guests as to who was responsible for the killing of her sister.
Was it you? No, it was an accident. I didn't kill anybody.
After a brief interaction between the animatronic and the tour guide, the witch disappeared and the vehicle continued down the yellow brick road and past the animatronic figures of Dorothy, the Tin Man, the Scarecrow, the Cowardly Lion, and Toto, who waved guests on while the beautiful Emerald City shimmered in the background. Although the scene was only a small fraction of the overall ride, it was the first time these characters were represented in a major theme park. And like I said, it was just iconic.
I'll get you, my pretty, and your little dog, too!
Sadly, the Great Movie Ride closed on August 13th, 2017. Today, the ride show building is home to the fun and equally lovable Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway, but gone from the park are any references to Oz. Well, almost. Although the history of this next project is curious in its own right, I briefly wanted to touch on the never-built White Winds theme park and its proposed Wizard of Oz land. White Winds was proposed in 1986 as a vacation park that would be built in Eureka Springs, Arkansas, right in the heart of the Ozarks. With an estimated cost of $400 million, this 630-acre park would have included lands themed to Atlantis, Dune, Tinseltown, Tin Pan Alley, and the one we're most interested in here, the Land of Oz. Had it been built, White Winds would have been the USA's largest theme park at the time. The company behind the park never elaborated on what rides and attractions would populate each of the lands, but the Land of Oz was said to, quote, feature the places and major characters from the series of fantasy tales that includes The Wizard of Oz, end quote. White Winds was supposed to open in 1988, and the park was projected to attract an ambitious 5 million visitors in its first year. However, local residents were extremely skeptical of the project, suspecting that it might be a scam. Like many other theme parks proposed for the region, it never came to be, and talk of it faded away as quickly as it came. The town of Aberdeen, South Dakota may seem like an unlikely place for a theme park, or anything for that matter, but South Dakota's third largest city actually has some significant ties to the Oz legacy. In fact, L. Frank Baum lived in Aberdeen for 3 years. While living here, he owned a novelty store called Baum's Bazaar, published a weekly newspaper called the Aberdeen Saturday Pioneer, and in 1900, he published a little novel called The Wonderful Wizard of Oz. I don't know, maybe you've heard of it. Flash forward to 1971, the city created Wiley Park, an elaborate recreational area complete with picnic spots, a playground, a campground, and a walking zoo. Just 2 years later, Wiley Park established Storybook Land, a small children's park where classic nursery rhymes and fairy tales come to life. Although the park only opened with 2 exhibits, the Pumpkin House and the Little Old Lady Who Lived in a Shoe, Storybook Land expanded every year with new rides and exhibits. But in 1990, a new yellow brick pathway was installed, the beginnings of a new expansion called the Land of Oz. I know, such an original name, right? The first attraction, Dorothy's House, was erected in 1994. It housed a gift shop, old furniture and knickknacks from the early 1900s, and a simulated special effects tornado. Like the rest of Storybook Land, the Land of Oz continued to grow and add more attractions over the years. Today, guests can wander the Yellow Brick Road and see iconic characters and their homes, ride the 30-horse Alan Herschel Carousel, and fly high on the Wizard's Balloon Ride. Although the park is small and clearly meant for children, it remains the most immersive and comprehensive Wizard of Oz theme park out there, at least for the time being. And now comes the most elaborate, most ambitious, and in some ways, the most shady Wizard of Oz project I've come across on this journey. The Wonderful World of Oz, an entire immersive theme park that was to be built in the vicinity of Kansas City, Kansas. Had it been built, it could have rivaled the likes of Disney and Universal. Ultimately, however, the project was cancelled and never came to be. But let's start at the beginning. Whoever thought of building a Wizard of Oz theme park in Dorothy's home state of Kansas was a genius. And that genius's name was David Landis. Inspired by Disney's unofficial 1985 Wizard of Oz sequel, Return to Oz, Landis pitched a $20 million, 60-acre Land of Oz amusement park in Lenexa, Kansas. You know who else thought that this would be a good idea? Parker Burton Stonefield, who pitched a similar idea for Wyandotte County in 1990. Well, if you ask our friend David Landis, he would say that Stonefield stole his idea, which wouldn't be out of character for Stonefield given his fraud-ridden past. Whatever the truth may be, neither of them could make the KC theme park happen. There was also a third plan proposed by George Saul of Kansas City, Missouri. His plans were far more ambitious than his predecessors and would include a $100 million movie studio dubbed halfway to Hollywood, as well as a shopping center and a hotel. But by 1990, this plan also melted away like the Wicked Witch of the West. Apparently, it's hard to get things done when your investors are involved in security fraud. Imagine that. But booyah, it's the 1990s! Enter Gus C. Fasone, a Kansas City restaurateur, Robert Corey, a Hollywood lawyer, and Dave Owen, a former lieutenant governor of Kansas. Actually, forget about Dave. He's out of the picture now because he was indicted for tax fraud. Oopsies. So, ignoring the fact that Fasone and Corey's previous projects suffered from mismanagement and financial distress, and that Fasone had a history of arrests and FBI investigations, I think we're free of shady businessmen, right? Great. A year later, Corey and Fasone founded Oz Resorts and Entertainment Co. Let's call them OEC, and bumped their initial budget of $200 million up to $300 million. The Wonderful World of Oz theme park would be just one component of a 900-acre site, which would also include a 300-room hotel, a golf course, an RV park, a recreational lake, and a shopping district. The 55-acre theme park would have had 6 themed lands: Old Kansas, Munchkin Land, Yellow Brick Country, the Haunted Forest, the Northern Kingdom, and, serving as the park's centerpiece, the awe-inspiring Emerald City. And, thanks to a well-documented master plan and a concept map, I had the privilege of sharing some of the attractions guests would have experienced at this park. After passing through the park's front gates, guests would find themselves in Old Kansas. This area of the park would represent a small Midwestern town at the turn of the 20th century, complete with a main street lined with shops and restaurants like Garland's Confectionery, Ruth's Good Books, the Baum Brothers Barbershop, the Dust Bowl Diner, and more. An exhibit called The Wonders of Travel would educate guests on the history of American transportation, and Dr. Worley's Electro Emporium would pay homage to the early history of electricity. Of course, the star attraction here would be The Road to Oz, a tribute to L. Frank Baum and the legacy of The Wizard of Oz and its adaptations. At the end of this main street, Old Kansas was split off into 2 mini-lands. To the left, Professor Marble's Traveling Fair would feature a small collection of carnival rides and games. Among these vintage funfair amusements would be a rotating theater called Wonders of the World, where Professor Marble would flaunt his bizarre collection of worldly treasures. This area would also house one of the 3 methods guests can use to enter the Land of Oz: Marvelous Balloon Flight, a gondola attraction in which guests board a hot air balloon bound for the Emerald City. Turning to the right, guests could visit the Gale family farm. The main attraction here, of course, would be Dorothy's house. After touring the residence, the magic of special effects would conjure up a powerful twister. Thanks to a back door exiting into Munchkin Land, this attraction serves as the second way guests can enter Oz. The Gale farm also would have had a barnyard-themed interactive play area, a spinning whip ride called Tractor Turner, and a refreshment stand run by the snobbish Miss Gulch. Of course, those who do not stray into these mini-lands can walk straight from the main street and onto the beautifully ornate Rainbow Bridge, crossing smoothly and efficiently into Munchkin Land. It's here that guests will find the swirling design of the red and yellow brick roads. Those who exit or pass by Dorothy's house may see the Wicked Witch of the East feet sticking out, sans ruby slippers. The town is celebrating her demise, and in an outdoor stage show called Ding Dong Celebration, the Munchkin Mayor proclaims Dorothy and the guests as heroes. Guests exploring the town square will find establishments such as Ojo's Lucky Finds, the Wardrobe of Revolt, Munchkin Munchies, and Lemon Drops. In the Munchkin Hall of Fame, guests will embark on what I'm sure would have been a fan-favorite dark ride based on the plot of the 1939 film called Dorothy's Adventures in Oz. Also in Munchkinland are the Windmill, a classic Ferris wheel attraction, and the Dainty River Cruise, a boat ride down the Munchkin River, where Munchkins go about their daily lives and celebrate the Wicked Witch's defeat. Munchkinland is also home to our first coaster credit of the park, Over the Rainbow, where Polychrome's colorful train takes guests through the multicolored caverns of a mountain made of fluffy white clouds. Following the yellow brick road takes guests to the third land of the park, Gilligan Country. Much of this area is themed with colorful farms growing vegetables and towering cornfields. Amidst the festivities of the Arbor Festival, guests can experience Grand Sawhorse Derby, an Autopia-style attraction where guests race each other on Tip's animated sawhorses, the Flying Gums Aerial Carousel, a teacup ride called TikTok's Clockwork Cogs, and Scarecrow's Amazing Maze. Guests can also visit Jack Pumpkinhead's house to buy homegrown food and meet Jack himself, while the Wobblebug's College of Art and Athletic Perfection would house an interactive dinner show in which the Wobblebug would guide the audience through the whimsical sights and sounds of Oz. Beyond the fields would be a forested area, complete with interactive apple trees that get a little feisty if you get too close. It's here that guests would find the Tin Flume. This log flume would flow through the workshops of the master tinkers, inventive but absent-minded men who might be causing more havoc than good. Following the climactic 50-foot drop, the Tinkers would present Tin Man with an entire closet of hearts, just in case his original one breaks. Aw, I think my own heart just melted a bit with that one. At the back of the land, the forest gives way to a dense jungle, where guests discover the temple ruins of the Palace of the Cowardly Lion. Within is an LMV dark ride called the Path to Courage, where guests help the Cowardly Lion face his worst fears, like Kaleidas, giant spiders, and flying monkeys, with powerful roars activated by buttons on the ride vehicles. Quadling Country, home to Glinda the Good Witch, would be a snowy winter wonderland that also incorporates ties to L. Frank Baum's Santa Claus stories. Guests enter the land through Dainty China Country, a beautifully designed village of oversized teapots and dishes, where they can ride the China teacups and the Dainty Carousel, or go ice skating on the China Princess Ice Pond. Beyond this would be the Forest of Fighting Trees stunt show, and up the snowy mountain, Glinda's Ice Palace would overlook the land. Within the palace, guests can meet and dine with Glinda at Glinda's banquet hall and climb up the icy towers. The mountains are also home to Santa's Grotto, a boat ride that takes guests on a journey to Santa's workshop, and tundra-tipped bobsleds, a bobsled coaster winding down the mountainside. Across the bridge from the castle, guests can shop in the Storybook Christmas Village and meet Santa Claus. Further down is a small harbor, where children can board Cat and Bill's mini motorboats, a small boat ride around a lake inhabited by friendly sea serpents. To the west lies the Haunted Forest, otherwise known as Winky Country, the dark, twisted home of the Wicked Witch of the West. The most prominent feature of the land is the witch's towering purple castle, which would house two e-ticket attractions. Flight of the Winged Monkeys appears to be a B&M invert that takes guests on a high-flying, thrilling adventure over the haunted forest. The River of Doom would be a rapids ride down the dark river, where wolves, crows, flying monkeys, haunted trees, and other such monsters lurk along its banks. The river would continue on to the realm of the Gnome King, a villainous figure who, while welcoming at first, suspects that the guests are there to destroy him. In the castle courtyard, guests can witness the changing of the guards and brave the crazy cauldron spinner ride. Within the castle itself, guests can experience the Wicked Witching Hour, a dark-humored show where all of the wicked witches and villains of Oz come together for a wickedly good time. And finally, at the end of the yellow brick road and at the park center lies the Emerald City. This land would be accessible from all other areas of the park, and guests staying at the Emerald Graham Hotel could travel directly to it via the Oz monorail line. Although just about everything in the Emerald City would be vibrantly colored in greens and golds, guests can also purchase green-tinted sunglasses, just as Dorothy and her friends did in Baum's original novel. A vast courtyard would offer spaces for guests who relax or meet with their favorite characters. At the center would be the Horse of a Different Color carousel, where all of the horses change color throughout the ride cycle. Guests could also visit the Emerald City Stables Petting Zoo, the Shaggy Man Storehouse Boutique, and the Emerald Green Palace Restaurant. Within the city is an audience with the great and powerful, an e-ticket special effects show where guests come face to face with the Wizard of Oz himself, only to discover that he's just a harmless humbug. Aerial Adventures Over Oz would be a flying theater similar to Soarin', where guests fly over Oz and its surrounding neighbors. However, the Wicked Witch of the West and her flying monkeys attempt to take down the giant airship along the way. The Emerald City is also where guests can meet Ozma and the other princesses of Oz, including Dorothy and Princess Langwidere of Ev Country. Of course, guests would be able to find many wonderful treasures in the Emerald City shops, like Ozma's dresses, headwear of Ev, and keys to the city, while restaurants like Taste of Kansas and Merry Old Lunches would satisfy every traveler's cravings. So, what exactly happened to this magnificent, impressive, Disney-level idea of a theme park? The project had a lot of support from the local and state governments, and it was slated to open by 1996. In 1993, the Wyandotte County government established a 3.8 square mile public enterprise zone. This land was intended for the Oz project and would help keep land prices down for OEC. However, as the years went on, nothing happened. Talk of adding a casino to the complex resulted in a loss of support from the Kansas legislature, and the budget for the project continued to grow as the opening date continued to be pushed back. By 1996, the OEC had not purchased a single acre of land. The budget had skyrocketed to over $500 million, and the company was now promising that the park would open in 2000, just in time for the book's centennial celebration. Around this time, the company brought in Skip Palmer, a former operations manager at Disney and a former World's Fair developer, to be the new project president. And yet, the company still didn't have any land to their name. So in 1997, a NASCAR racetrack, today known as the Kansas Speedway, was approved for the site originally set aside for the park. Now, here's the thing. The site could have easily accommodated both the theme park and the racetrack, but you see, it would have restricted Oz's plans for complementary projects like the shopping district and all that jazz. But hey, you snooze, you lose. Anyways, in retaliation to this, the OEC announced in January 1998 that they were abandoning their plans in Wyandotte County and were instead looking to build a resort in the site of the former Sunflower Army ammunition plant near DeSoto in Johnson County. This new site offered 9,065 acres of mostly undeveloped land, and it was located close to several major traffic routes and population centers. Perfect, right? Well, that's until you hear what was going on underneath the surface. The Sunflower Army ammunition plant was developed in 1941 to build ammunition components during World War II. It was the largest facility of its kind in the US and operated for over 50 years until it was decommissioned in 1997. Now, an operation of that kind is going to have some environmental consequences, such as high levels of lead, reactive cyanide, trinitroglycerin, and asbestos contaminating, well, everything. The soil, the water, the foundations, the pipes, the sewers. Yeah, that sounds like the perfect place for a theme park to me. Environmental remediation would be extensive and expensive. In 2000, the OEC estimated that the cleanup would cost somewhere between $30 and $40 million. But in reality, over $228 million had been spent to decontaminate only 5,300 acres of the 9,065 acre site. Of course, that money was not spent by the OEC, but that's a story for another day. There was also the matter that the US Army cannot directly sell land to private entities, so a complicated 12-step land process would have been required for OEC to acquire the site. On top of all that, shady businessmen are gonna be shady businessmen. Many people, both investors and members of the general public, did not like the team spearheading the project. Commissioner Lingle, one of the county commissioners who voted against greenlighting the park, stated that he worried about, quote, the perceived lack of integrity, credibility, honesty, and professional organization of the Oz project, end quote. The OEC also refused to pay Wyandotte County the $550,000 that they owed them for feasibility studies. With no additional funding for the project and a lack of confidence in the company, Corey released a statement in October of 2001 reporting that the OEC had closed and had no prospects to build its wonderful World of Oz park. Although he blamed county politics and the September 11th terrorist attacks, it was revealed in the end that the company only had $10,000 to its credit. It was barely enough to make a dent in what they owed, and a far cry from the now $700 million budget required to build the park. It's a shame that the Wonderful World of Oz was never built, because it did sound like a wonderful idea. Perhaps the idea isn't totally dead, but at least for now, the idea remains a dream lying in wait somewhere over the rainbow. As far as I can tell, no other Wizard of Oz theme park has been proposed since the failure of the Wonderful World of Oz. And although we have two interesting takes on the Land of Oz in Beech Mountain and Aberdeen, they certainly don't live up to the detailed and immersive plans that were intended for the Kansas City theme park. Like I said at the top of the episode, I can think of very few properties that are more deserving of some kind of theme park representation than the Wizard of Oz. So the fact that there hasn't been any kind of new Wizard of Oz lands or attractions since Storybook Land's Land of Oz is perplexing. Thankfully, that's all about to change. But not in Kansas, not in the United States, not even in the Northern Hemisphere. This time, we're going over the rainbow and down under to Warner Bros. Movie World in Queensland, Australia. On July 20th, 2022, the park announced that they would be adding the world's first Wizard of Oz themed Precinct, or land for those of us who don't see kangaroos on a daily basis. Although official names for the precinct and its attractions have yet to be announced, Movie World has said that it will open with 2 new roller coasters, a suspended family coaster, and a racing family boomerang. Looking at the concept art, it looks like the precinct will open with 2 sublands, Dorothy's Farm, which is where we'll find the boomerang, and the Haunted Forest, which is where we'll find the suspended coaster. Interestingly, current rumors suggest that this coaster will be inspired by the Flying Monkeys, just like the suspended coaster that was planned for the Wonderful World of Oz. There will also be an interactive play area modeled after the Emerald City. All of this is set to open by 2024, bringing the beloved classic into the realm of theme parks once again. Although I don't have any plans to visit Australia in the near future, I am very excited for this project. Finally, this amazing story is getting the theme park representation it deserves. And maybe, just maybe, it'll inspire similar installations at theme parks closer to home. For now, that concludes the theme park history of the Wizard of Oz. But since we like to include attractions and destinations beyond the theme parks on this channel, I would be remiss if I didn't shout out some of the other wonderful Wizard of Oz attractions that are out there. Although there's no theme park, visitors to Dorothy's home state of Kansas will find plenty of fun experiences, like the Oz Museum in Wamego, which features more than 2,000 Wizard of Oz artifacts, colorful exhibits, a gift shop, and more. This town is also home to the Oz Winery, where you'll find uniquely Ozian bottles of Witch Gone Good, Drunken Munchkins, Dorothy's Dream, and more. Jumping over to Sedan, Kansas, you'll find a yellow brick road comprised of 11,500 bricks spanning their downtown. At the Land of Oz in Liberal, you can explore Dorothy's house, complete with animations and memorabilia, with a special tour guided by Dorothy herself. The franchise has also inspired many festivals and special events, like the Wizard of Oz train ride, where guests board real trains at select heritage railroads across the US and travel with Dorothy and her friends to the Emerald City, defeating the Wicked Witch of the West along the way. Upon reaching their destination, guests would have a chance to meet the great and powerful Oz in a live stage show. Another interesting event I came across in my research was Oztoberfest, an annual celebration of all things Wizard of Oz in Wamego, Kansas. And finally, I have to shout out this adorable Wizard of Oz themed playground at Watkins Park in Upper Marlboro, Maryland. Now, these are just a few examples, but I'm sure there are countless other events and experiences based on this iconic story. A good story will always stand the test of time, and people will cherish it and celebrate it in all sorts of ways. Although I'm surprised by the lack of Wizard of Oz theme park attractions out there, it isn't because of a lack of love. The theme park industry is one that evolves and changes at a rapid pace, and people are dreaming up new ideas every single day. I'm sure Movie World isn't the last place where we'll see Oz come to life. We'll just have to wait and see what the future brings, and what kind of experiences wait for us somewhere over the rainbow. Thank you so much for diving into the theme park history of the Wizard of Oz with me today. If you know of any Oz-themed attractions, events, or experiences that I might have missed, whether they were realized or not, comment below and let me know. Also be sure to tell me if you've experienced any of these wonderful attractions for yourself. If you would like to see more theme park discussion videos, plus vlogs from all of my theme park, travel, local, and outdoor adventures, you might want to consider becoming a subscriber. I'm hoping to reach 1,000 subs by the end of the year, so your help in getting me to that goal is greatly appreciated. You can also find me on social media at ADVParker. And finally, a big thank you to my patrons for all of the extra support you give me. I truly appreciate every one of you. If you would like to become a Patreon member yourself, just follow the link on the screen or down in the description. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and remember, there's no place like home. Until next time, the adventures are calling. Bye-bye!
Be gone before somebody drops a house on you too.